Good, Dutch.
It's been a long time, General.
Come on inside.
18 hours ago, we lost a chopper carrying a cabinet minister and his aide from this charming little country. We've got a transponder fix on their position. About here.
This cabinet minister, does he always travel on the wrong side of the border?
Apparently, they strayed off course, and we're fairly certain they're in guerrilla hands.
So why don't you use the regular army? What do you need us for?
'Cause some damn fool accused you of being the best.
Dylan! You son of a bitch!
In a world overflowing with movies, we need a hero. Someone to separate the bad from the good.
Sounds like a job. Verbal dioramas. Watches all the movies from comedy to drama. From the top row sound. And don't forget the action. She'll watch until the end and then she'll give you her reaction. Movies you know, movies you don't. Prequels, sequels, remakes, and trivia and outtakes. Movies you know, movies you don't. Interesting stories, all the categories.
Hi everyone, I'm Em and welcome to Babble Diorama episode 267, Predator. This is the podcast that's all about the history and legacy of movies you know and movies you don't. And as always, a huge hi and welcome to Verbal Diorama. Whether you are a brand new listener to this podcast, whether you are a regular returning listener to this podcast, thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing to listen to this podcast. And as always, I'm so happy to have you here for the history and legacy of Predator. This podcast has been going on for, well, 5.5 years now, which is pretty crazy. And this is episode 267. So I've been busy, but I'm always so grateful to the people who do listen to this podcast. So thank you so much for your support and for your lovely comments for some of the most recent episodes of this podcast, for Zoolander and for Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which has had a really great reception. So I'm absolutely over the moon for that. And obviously, with it coming so soon after I did Star Trek the Motion Picture, I was a little bit worried that maybe they were a bit too close together. Usually, I like to space sequels out a little bit, unless I'm doing like a particular double bill. But it seems like it's been really well received. So thank you so much if you have listened. And obviously, thank you so much if you've provided some feedback on that episode or literally any episodes that I've ever done. Now, I'm feeling kind of manly. And I need a boost to my manliness. So what better than a movie where some big, strapping, muscular dudes get picked off one by an alien who's more skilled, more effective, and lives for the chase. A predator, you might call him. Get to the chopper. Here's the trailer for Predator.
We're a rescue team, not assassins. Now, what do we gotta do?
In a part of the world where there are no rules,
We pick up their trailer at the chopper, run them down, grab those hostages before anybody knows we were there.
What do you mean we?
deep in the jungle, where nothing that lives is safe,
You lose it here, you're in a world of hurt.
Showtime, kid.
Knock, knock.
an elite rescue squad
You're bleeding, man. I ain't got time to bleed.
is being led by the ultimate warrior.
We need the best. That's why you're here.
But now,
What's got Billy so spooked?
there's something out there waiting for us. And it ain't no man. They're up against the ultimate enemy.
Holy Mother of God.
Nothing like it has ever been on Earth before.
She says the jungle just came alive and took him.
We cannot see it,
No blood, no bodies. We hit nothing.
but it sees the heat of our bodies and the heat of our fear.
Whatever it is out there, it killed Harper. And now it wants us.
It kills for pleasure.
He was skinned alive!
It hunts for sport.
It's killing us one at a time.
We're all gonna die.
But this time, it's picked the wrong man to hunt.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
Pictures presents Arnold Schwarzenegger. Predator. The hunt begins Friday, June 12th at theaters everywhere.
A team of special force operatives led by tough but fair soldier Major Dutch Schaefer are ordered to assist CIA man Colonel Al Dillon on a rescue mission for potential survivors of a helicopter downed over a remote South American jungle. Not long after they land, Dutch and his team discover that they have been sent in under false pretenses. This deception turns out to be the least of their worries, though, when they find themselves being methodically hunted by something not human. Let's run through the cast. We have Arnold Schwarzenegger as Major Dutch Schaefer, Carl Weathers as Al Dillon, Elpidia Carrillo as Anna Gonsalves, Bill Duke as Master Sergeant Mac Elliott, Richard Chavez as Staff Sergeant Poncho Ramirez, Jesse Ventura as Sergeant First Class Blaine Cooper, Sonny Landham as Sergeant First Class Billy Soule, Shane Black as Sergeant Rick Hawkins, R.G. Armstrong as Major General Phillips, and Kevin Peter Hall as the Predator. Predator was written by Jim Thomas and John Thomas and was directed by John McTiernan. And this is not the first time the Predator has appeared on this podcast. All the way back in November 2021, I did an episode on Alien vs. Predator and Aliens vs. Predator Requiem. It was the culmination of all episodes on the Alien franchise, which started in August 2021 with Alien, then Aliens, then a double episode on Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, and then another double episode on Prometheus and Alien Covenant. And I said I'd always come back to Predator. And I haven't until now, because I had 2 spaces in August that I needed to fill. And so Predator filled the first space, and the other, well, I guess you're going to have to wait till the end of the episode to find out what movie fills that one. But the Predator, or to give it its official name, the Yautja, didn't have an established backstory before this movie. But since this movie, they've featured in other movies, crossed over with other franchises, have had comic book series, novels, and video games. The term Yautja was first used in the novel Aliens vs. Predator Prey, which was itself a novel adaptation of the original Aliens vs. Predator comic book series, the first media to discuss the predators at length from their own perspective. Their history and culture has been built up to become rich and varied, with the Yautja having hunted on Earth for centuries, having contact with early human civilizations like the ancient Egyptians, the Khmer Empire, and the Aztecs. When the Yautja first came to Earth, people worshipped them as gods. They also taught many civilizations how to construct pyramids, which explains why so many different ancient societies shared remarkably similar cultures and architectural styles. However, in exchange, the Yautja demanded human sacrifices in order to use humans as hosts for huntable xenomorphs, which were the ultimate prey. Every century, the Yautja came back to complete the deal. However, during one ritual, the xenomorphs got out of control and the Yautja exploded a bomb that destroyed the entire civilization. After that, the relationship between humans and predators declined, with the Yautja seeing humans as little more than prey to be hunted. When hunting humans, Yautja normally avoid certain individuals like children and some adults if they are unarmed, because they are sport creatures, and there's no honour in killing an unarmed or vulnerable human. There are multiple Yautja clans, each with their own ideals and beliefs. Not all clans see humans as a threat, not all see them as weak. Some are fascinated by humanity, and as we see in Alien vs. Predator, there are some willing to work with humans and show respect to humans. They all have different societal ranks, distinctive and sophisticated weaponry, including adaptive camouflage, as well as polytheistic religious beliefs, and a matriarchal clan society where the strongest lead. This is all a wealth of history that's been created over the last 35 years, and there's loads of information online should you wish to know a bit more. But the Yautja, or indeed the Predator, wasn't always called the Predator. He was the Hunter, or at least the original script by brothers Jim and John Thomas was called Hunter. The idea being, how would it feel to be hunted by an alien creature like humans hunt big game in Africa? Originally about a band of hunters who hunt various species across the world, it was simplified to a group of soldiers being hunted in Central America. At the time, John Thomas was recovering from a back injury, and writing a screenplay ended up being a chill experience with his brother on the beach. 3 months later, they had a script, and because they didn't have an agent, they decided to try and send it to every agent and producer they could think of, and just ended up getting a bunch of rejection letters. They heard of a particular reader at Fox and ended up sliding it under the door of producer Michael Levy at the studio, and despite a change of administration at Fox at the time, it ended up being sent to Joel Silver, who brought it to the attention of president of 20th Century Fox, Lawrence Gordon, who loved the script, which was purchased without the brothers having an agent or a lawyer, which is practically unheard of and probably ill-advised, especially the lawyer part. It ended up with producer John Davis, who was friends with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Davis had worked on Commando, and a lot of this movie rests on Commando, actually, and relationships forged on Commando. And he also recommended John McTiernan to direct after his film Nomads. And this movie would be McTiernan's first studio film. When Schwarzenegger was approached by Silver and Gordon, he liked the uniqueness of the script, but didn't want it to be a one-man versus alien. He recommended it be a team of elite forces with him leading, as this would be a believable reason to have a team of commandos in the jungle with a believable story of rescuing hostages. Unlike Commando, where he was more of a cartoon strongman carrying trees in his first scene, his role in Predator would be realistic and raw and would be a story of the survival of the fittest. And despite the bravado and muscles, he'd be an everyman hero, and the idea was to surround Arnie with a team of the machoest of macho men. And so they did. Apollo Creed himself, Carl Weathers, was the first choice to play Dylan. Former professional wrestler and Navy SEAL Jesse Ventura had served in Vietnam and co-starred with Schwarzenegger in The Running Man, which was out the same year. Bill Duke had co-starred with him in Commando. Casting director Jackie Birch wanted to get specifically Vietnam vets, which also included Richard Chavez, who was scouted after being one of the authors of the play Tracers. Originally, he auditioned for The Three Amigos, but he didn't get that part. Instead, he got the part in Predator. Shane Black was not a Vietnam vet, but after his script Lethal Weapon landed him a $250,000 deal with Warner Brothers, Davis was interested in having him do some rewrites for Predator. At the time, he was also helping Fred Decker write The Monster Squad. That's episode 96 of this podcast, by the way. And he would ask Joel Silver for a small role in Predator, as well as do uncredited rewrites. He dies pretty quickly in this movie, presumably because he was also doing uncredited rewrites. In the script, the Predator had a camouflage effect, meaning he was invisible, but also visible. And bearing in mind this was the mid-80s, and CG was a thing, but it wasn't really a thing, was it even possible to render this on screen? Not to mention the idea of his heat vision and glowing blood. R. Greenberg Associates was tasked with the optical effects, and visual effects supervisor Joel Hynek was charged with coming up with those effects. He figured out he could make a series of inline mats. That is, instead of making an outline, making an inline, and creating a whole series of concentrated inline mats. And in that series of inline mats, put the background shot separately and reduce it a little bit per each inline. And that would give a camouflage effect. And it would work well in the jungle when the background would be mostly leaves. It also obviously meant because you had leaves and foliage in the background, you couldn't use a traditional green suit. And nor could you use a blue suit due to the blue sky. So they would end up filming with a red suit. But I'm going to come back to filming in a little bit. So firstly, the assembled cast was supposed to be an elite military force. Some of them had had military backgrounds, but most of them were just actors paid to pretend to be special forces. But not on this movie, soldier. Military advisor Gary Goldman was an officer in Vietnam, and he was doing special ops training when John Davis called him, asking him to help advise and train the actors for a week in Mexico before filming began. He would take them on runs in the Mexican jungle and along busy roads, including Schwarzenegger, who impressed Goldman with his ability to keep up with the training regime. He also did weapons introductions, instructing how to hold and fire certain weapons, because this would be a movie with a lot of guns. And it would also be a shoot with a lot of machismo, a lot of competitive workouts, and a lot of weight loss. They'd often walk 10-mile treks in the Mexican jungle, and Goldman would perform the role of drill sergeant. The shoot was due to take place in the spring and summer of 1996 in Puerto Vallarta, on Mexico's Pacific coast. There was a brief delay in filming to accommodate Schwarzenegger's prior commitments, as well as a planned break in the middle to accommodate his wedding to Maria Shriver. Planned changes you can deal with, but unplanned issues, that's a totally different thing. Schwarzenegger shipped an entire gym's worth of equipment to Mexico so he could train, and many of the cast and stuntmen trained with him. Safe to say there was a lot of one-upmanship on this movie, but it's also fair that Schwarzenegger was the consummate professional and they all followed his lead. He had been the Terminator and he was on his way to becoming a huge star, so they all just followed the example that he set. And that example was professional on set and off set. Well, they were young guys and they went to nightclubs and bars, and Sonny Landham was unpredictable when drunk. So security was hired just so he didn't get into any trouble while he was intoxicated. And because they obviously needed to go off and design and build the Predator suit, they wouldn't have the actual Predator on set until much later in the shoot. So everything without him was shot first. To make the jungle look more lush, they placed fresh plants around the location. They even had a Mexican leaf crew to get fresh leaves and replenish leaves that had been trampled on and were browning. But a 56-day scheduled shoot wasn't nearly long enough to accommodate the various health issues on set, with many of the cast and crew suffering from diarrhea from water purification issues. The water, because it was a jungle, was stagnant, full of bacteria and leeches, and the cast were often bitten by ants and other insects. Snakes, scorpions, and spiders were everywhere, and ticks were plentiful. After 48 days filming, McTiernan had shot less than half the movie, and the studio was threatening to shut down production. The Palapa sequence, where the team attempts to rescue the hostages, and it ends up becoming a huge gun-filled and explosion-filled melee, was an attempt to placate the studio into letting them carry on making the movie. It was shot over 8 days with the whole cast involved in every major stunt, and second unit director and stunt coordinator Craig Baxley, who had come from similar style setups on the A-Team, with things like pyrotechnics and choreographed stunt work. Perched atop a 2-story Palapa, he had 2 stuntmen, and he detonated the entire Palapa when they were in the air, destroying the entire structure, and buried 4 pads in the ground. Simultaneously, there was another man approaching a different camera on an air ram, and to get things going, he had Arnold turn, aim, and hit the grenade launcher. Even though only 4 cameras were used for the stunt, it appeared as though World War III was breaking out, and John McTiernan actively hated this scene. But once it was all cut together in the finished film, it was the ultimate macho, bravado, 80s explosions and Hollywood excess, and audiences would lap it up. The original design of the Yautja was not at all like what's in the finished movie. Boss Film Studios had been enlisted and Richard Edlund was in charge of the original creature design. While John McTiernan and Joel Silver had approved the design originally, Boss was never truly happy with the requirements that had been laid out for them. They delivered what was required, and it was almost impossible to realise as a full-grown creature performed by an actor in a suit. And yeah, I'm coming to that actor in the suit. The original design had a distinct insect-like appearance, with a long neck, dog-shaped head, and large yellow eyes. Its skin was covered in complex and bizarre textures, and the suit was fitted with 12-inch leg extensions, with a 3rd leg joint, which would be almost impossible for a human to walk on. The plan was to harness the actor and hang him from wires mounted onto an overhead boom arm to extend puppet legs beneath him. But as you can imagine, this was wildly impractical on location in the Mexican jungle. There were no controlled sound stages or sets. There was just humidity, water, and various other issues that made the suit impractical and not fit for the requirements of an action movie. The suit wouldn't even bend at the waist either. Because they wanted an action star to take on an action star, they wanted a world-class martial artist to leap around and do death-defying stunts as the creature, to make him a dangerous and agile hunter, and they designed this first iteration of the suit to a world-class martial artist. He was still a virtual unknown at the time of his meeting with casting director Jackie Birch, but she admitted no one moved like him and recommended him to Joel Silver. I am talking, of course, about the muscles from Brussels, Jean-Claude Van Damme. For Van Damme, he thought this would be his breakthrough role, opposite one of the biggest action stars of the time, and that he would have to wear maybe a bit of makeup and a leotard, So he was completely overwhelmed then to turn up for a full body cast at Boss Studios and realising it would be a thick, unforgiving rubber suit, which would make the thing he was hired for, his martial arts and his agile body movements, almost impossible. His vision and breathing were both impaired too. In an air-conditioned studio with safety protocols in place, that might not be such an issue, but they were on location in Mexico. The ground was uneven, he'd be on stilts, and the temperature was regularly hitting 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 37 degrees Celsius. Health and safety would be having a field day on this set. Van Damme didn't just hate the actual suit, though. He also hated the red suit he would have to wear for the camouflage scenes. It apparently looked like a giant red rubber chicken. The crew had also tried to get a monkey to wear a red suit too at one point, but the monkey just ran off. Now, reports around Van Damme's eventual exit from this movie, whether leaving by his own volition or by being fired, are mixed and plentiful. There are at least 6 different accounts from eyewitnesses, bystanders, Van Damme himself, and various cast and crew that could all be true. The general consensus about the Predator suit was that they needed to resolve the issues. They ended up redesigning the suit and going with Stan Winston, and I'm going to come back to all of that. But the reasons why Jean-Claude Van Damme left the picture consist mostly of the following 6 reasons, all of which are out there on the record. They are: he complained too much about the heat, the fact he couldn't move or see, and about the genuine safety concerns on the set, which led to him being fired. That is according to casting director Jackie Birch. That he hated the costume so much that he intentionally broke the head, which cost $20,000, by throwing it onto the ground in anger in front of Joel Silver, who fired him on the spot, according to second unit director and stunt coordinator Craig Baxley. That when pitted against the much taller actors on the film, the 5'6" Jean-Claude Van Damme was considered too short to be a viable foe. This was according to producer John Davis. It's worth adding the man who would replace him was Kevin Peter Hall, and he was over 7 foot tall. That he wanted his face to be shown on screen, perhaps going back to the breaking of the head, and that his complaint on having to wear it fell on deaf ears. So when the studio was sent the Dailies of Van Damme in costume, and they hated it so much they decided to not only redesign it, but also to fire Jean-Claude Van Damme for being so difficult. And that is according to castmate Richard Chavez. That he passed out from dehydration one too many times due to the intense heat on the shoot, and Joel Silver told him to stop fainting as if he was doing it on purpose. He passed out again while suspended from wires in the trees, and Joel Silver fired him. That is according to castmate Bill Duke. Or the final reason, that he walked out when he was told to stop kickboxing on set because the creature wasn't a kickboxer. Joel Silver tried to fire him, but Van Damme replied that Silver could kiss a dangling part of his anatomy and walked out, according to visual effects supervisor Joel Hynek. These are all as told to The Hollywood Reporter. In any case, what happened was that the production had a creature that almost everybody thought was a bust and no one to play him. The budget was ballooning, so the decision was made to suspend production. It's worth adding that Van Damme tells his own story, that he was asked to make a dangerous jump in the suit, to which he refused to do it, citing safety concerns. Allegedly, a stuntman did the jump instead, and Van Damme, in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, said that, quote, something bad happened to him, crack, unquote, and makes a snapping motion. He claims they stopped filming and then made the outfit safer. He was then dismissed by Joel Silver. It's also worth noting that no one on the movie corroborates this, with first assistant director Bo Marks bluntly stating that, quote, nobody broke their expletive leg, unquote. Marks continues by supporting the testimonies of Richard Chavez, producer John Davis, and earlier remarks made by John McTiernan, who insisted that Jean-Claude Van Damme was, in a very banal Hollywood manner, simply collateral damage following the studio's decision to scrap the original Predator design. But going back to the Predator design itself, because Arnold Schwarzenegger knew a guy who he thought could save the movie, and that guy was Stan Winston, the master of makeup effects, who had worked with Schwarzenegger on The Terminator and was about to win his first Oscar for his work on Aliens in 1986. Rick Baker did bid for the work, but Winston met with John McTiernan and Joel Silver and started work right away on a character rather than a generic creature. Time wasn't really on their side though. They had 6 weeks to design and build a new Predator. But Stan Winston had a high opinion of the concept and obviously of his friend Arnold Schwarzenegger. But the team at Stan Winston's studio were already working on other projects, including the Monster Squad, so the pressure really was on. A painting of an otherworldly Rastafarian warrior that was in Joel Silver's office served as the model for the Predator design. When Winston saw that, he thought it was a brilliant idea for the Predator. He began sketching and redrawing an extraterrestrial figure, giving it quills that, when viewed in silhouette, resembled dreadlocks. On a flight with James Cameron, Winston showed him the designs. Allegedly, it was James Cameron who suggested the character have mandibles. Rather than avoid the idea of a man in a suit, Winston had the idea to embrace a man in a suit by giving the creature a humanoid alien mythology. The final design was by Amalgamated Dynamics' future co-founders Alec Guinness and Tom Woodruff Jr., who at the time were working at Stan Winston's studio. They would found Amalgamated Dynamics in 1988 and go on to work on movies like Tremors, Alien 3 and Death Becomes Her, all past episodes of this podcast, just FYI. Their design was essentially humanoid in physiology with the exception of an insectoid head and tusks that extended from the mandibles. This allowed it to be portrayed by a performer wearing a suit who could walk without the use of wires or harnesses. Although it was a low-tech solution, it worked well in this particular case to address the previous issues of health and safety. They'd also found a new actor, Kevin Peter Hall, who'd just come off filming Harry and the Hendersons as the titular Harry, a Bigfoot. So he had previous experience wearing a large, heavy suit with a mechanical head. The team at Stan Winston's studio worked 7 days a week to sculpt and finish multiple suit and mechanical predator heads, each with moving tusks and mandibles and a fully animatronic face. Meanwhile, the producers had to persuade Leonard Goldberg, Fox's new president of production, to grant permission for everyone to go back to Mexico and finish the movie, which by this point was just the movie's third act, and it would just be Arnold versus the Predator, and it would be Kevin Peter Hall as the creature for the final showdown, with some of Jean-Claude Van Damme's red suit performance in the finished film. But obviously you wouldn't know that because he's camouflaged. Hall still had issues wearing the suit. It was heavy, it affected his balance, and he couldn't see properly, but at least he wasn't suspended by wires and on stilts. Filming recommenced in February 1987 in Palenque, just north of the Mexican border with Guatemala, for the 101 between Dutch and the Yaucha. 2.5 weeks of reshoots turned into 3 months of reshoots, with a brand new red suit design as well. Schwarzenegger had issues of his own. The heat of the jungle had turned into the cold of the jungle, and the water was particularly icy. Not to mention the mud that he's wearing is actually pottery clay, which didn't help insulate him, and he was constantly freezing cold. They tried to warm him up by giving him Jaeger tea, traditional Austrian punch, but instead of warming him, it just got him drunk. Heat lamps had to be constantly on at all times. But going back to that red suit and the effectiveness of the red suit in this movie, they used chroma key techniques to eliminate the red, leaving an empty space. And then next, with a 30% wider lens on the camera, they would redo the takes without the actors. The jungle from the second take filled the blank space when the 2 takes were combined optically. The alien shape was distorted by the background scenery, making a vague outline available, as the second take was captured using a wider lens. When Joel Silver went back to the studio to get more money for the redesign of the Predator, he actually showed them footage of this effect and said, "Look how cool this is. Imagine this, and then when the monster appears, it's even cooler." They would combine KY jelly with the active liquids found in glow sticks to create the Predator's luminescent green blood. However, the mixture quickly lost its glow. If you've ever been to a club or a rave with glow sticks, you'll know that they don't last very long. And this meant it required constant mixing in between takes. Originally, the blood was supposed to be orange in order to contrast more effectively with the background of mostly green jungle. But the crew couldn't find any orange glow sticks, so the blood then became green. The special effects team, who'd already finished multiple shots with the original orange blood, had to scrap and reshoot those scenes as a result. Because the ambient temperature in Mexico was around 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and at 94 degrees you can no longer distinguish a human being from a background, infrared film didn't register in the range of wavelengths associated with body temperature, so that couldn't be used for the predator's point of view thermal vision. Because the Inframetrics thermal video scanner produced high-quality heat images of people and objects, the filmmakers used that, but because you can't record heat vision on videotape, they actually ended up recording off the heat vision monitor. The crew would end up spraying trees with ice water to cool down the surrounding area, but over time, temperature cooled and they could get the shots they needed. The famous clicking noises were recorded by Peter Cullen, and he took inspiration from the noise crabs make because he thought the predator looked a bit crab-like. And after the 3-month shoot in Mexico, the filmmakers would then spend several weeks filming on a green screen stage in Los Angeles, and this allowed them to capture some of the more challenging action scenes in a safe and controlled setting of a stage, and then composite these elements into location plates, which is probably something that Jean-Claude Van Damme would have really benefited from if he still was the Predator. After every day of green screen filming, makeup artist Howard Berger was tasked with taking home the Predator suits to dry them out, because as you can imagine, they were very sweaty and very smelly at the end of each day. Segueing into something that's neither sweaty nor smelly, but it is the obligatory Keanu reference of this episode. And if you don't know what that is, it's where I try and link the movie that I'm featuring with Keanu Reeves for no reason other than he is the ultimate predator of literal injustice towards everyone, because he's a good guy. So this is a weird one, but in March 2007, a double bill occurred, a weird double bill, with 20th Century Fox releasing a DVD of Predator and Chain Reaction, which seems like an odd pairing for a DVD double bill, right? Is it just me who thinks that's a weird pairing? But I accept it as an obligatory Keanu reference as to how I'm going to link Keanu to the Predator, because he was in a double bill once on a DVD with Predator and Chain Reaction. Although obviously I could have used the fact that Keanu has worked with Joel Silver several times, including on The Matrix. Joel Silver obviously also being a producer here too, but that is definitely one of the weirdest obligatory Keanu references I've ever managed to pull up. The DVD does exist. It is on Amazon. I guess if you want to buy it and you fancy a copy of Predator and a copy of Chain Reaction, then it's available. Maybe I should get an affiliate link or something for it. Joel Silver originally intended Michael Kamen, whom he'd collaborated on with Lethal Weapon, to write the score for Predator. However, Kamen was committed to his work on Adventures in Babysitting. Alan Silvestri had been in the business for about 15 years at this point, but he'd only just begun to gain recognition in the last 3 of those years, mostly from his work on Romancing the Stone, Back to the Future and Flight of the Navigator. Romancing the Stone and Back to the Future are both previous episodes of this podcast. John McTiernan suggested Silvestri after hearing his Back to the Future score, and since then his score has been repurposed and reused in other Predator movies and the Alien vs Predator movie as well. So Predator would be released on the 12th of June 1987 and went straight to number 1 at the domestic US box office, beating off The Witches of Eastwick into second, before The Witches of Eastwick climbed up to number 1 for the second week. Predator made $12 million in its first week, very almost its entire budget, actually. And that budget was $15 million, and Predator would end up being a success financially, grossing $59.7 million domestically and $38.5 million internationally, for a total worldwide gross of $98.3 million. It would also become the 10th highest grossing movie of 1987 in the US. On Rotten Tomatoes, it currently sits at 80%, with the site's critical consensus reading Predator, part sci-fi, part horror, part action, or muscle. But on its release in 1987, critics were mixed. While Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 4, Janet Maslin was critical of the movie, calling it alternately grisly and dull. Barry Norman said, quote, "In Predator, Arnold Schwarzenegger takes on an 8-foot-tall homicidal alien from space. Guess who wins?" unquote. But its reputation has grown over the years and is considered one of the 80s biggest action movie classics. When it came to awards, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences weren't sure which category the Predator belonged in when it came time to nominate him for an Academy Award, because of the combination of techniques used in the visual effects. The character's mechanical features pointed to the makeup effects category, but the camouflage effect also gave the creature a visual effects element. In the end, Stan Winston and his team were nominated for the Best Visual Effects Oscar. They were defeated by Inner Space, but despite classifying the Predator creature as a visual effect, that same year the Academy awarded Rick Baker an Oscar in the Best Makeup category for his work on Harry and the Hendersons, which was the same sort of effect as in The Predator, a man in a suit with an animatronic head. And that creature had also been played by the same guy, Kevin Peter Hall. Now, of course, the success of Predator led to 3 direct sequels over the next 31 years, each by different directors, starting with Predator 2 in 1990. Schwarzenegger was offered the chance to return, but he declined it to star in Terminator 2 Judgment Day. The second sequel, Predators, was released in 2010. A 4th film, The Predator, was released in 2018 and is set between the events of Predator 2 and Predators. While never named on screen, the creatures from the first 2 films in the series have often come to be known as the Jungle Hunter and the City Hunter, respectively, nicknames based on their chosen hunting grounds. And this was first used in the 2005 video game Predator Concrete Jungle. There were also video games on Predator in 1987 and 2 called Predator 2, one in 1990 and one in 1992. Arnold Schwarzenegger did reprise his role eventually in paid DLC in the 2020 multiplayer video game Predator Hunting Grounds, which was the first Predator video game in 15 years. A prequel, Prey, was released in 2022 as a Hulu original film on Disney+. And of course, the Yautja appears in Alien vs. Predator and Aliens vs. Predator Requiem. And really, the everlasting legacy of the Predator movie and the Predator franchise is the Yautja himself. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was the ultimate action hero of the 1980s, and Predator became one of many films in which he played the last man standing after everything else was decimated. And yet Dutch, despite being a hulk of a man, surrounded by similarly butch macho men, is still as vulnerable as the rest of us would be at the very end. He's traumatized. He's not all bravado and cheering. It shows his humanity. Everyone he loved in his unit are gone. And more movies should acknowledge the trauma that an event like this would bring on, should you be the only survivor. Predator's first half is filled with many of the extravagant action sequences that defined the 1980s, and the movie's finale is ultimately an exercise in suspense and tension. But for all that manly male man action seems to hide a subtle commentary on masculine culture. Muscles, war paint, and big guns that are in no way metaphors for penises actually mean nothing against a formidable foe. One of the great memes in the history of the internet comes from the image of the alpha male Arnold Schwarzenegger grabbing the hand of a muscular Carl Weathers, mano a mano, with both having huge arms and bulging biceps. But fundamentally, these are 2 men at odds. Dutch and his team are sent under false pretenses, because all armed forces leaders tell the truth about their missions, right? It's a stark reminder of how corruptible these kinds of special military ops are, especially when this movie is so loaded with Vietnam visuals and so heavily inspired by Vietnam. Soldiers with good intentions still kill the wrong people under orders from their superiors. John McTiernan would later consider the unexpected impact the Predator had on action movie history, as well as how the movie altered the genre in the years that followed. McTiernan would say that after the scene in which the cast shoot their guns into the jungle in an attempt to kill the creature was mandated by the studio, the scene was so popular with audiences, the studio made him do it again in Die Hard, where the Germans just shoot loads of bullets at McClane's location in the office. The director pointed out the Matrix trilogy as another series of movies that would have similar kinds of scenes, also produced by Joel Silver, where guns, lots of guns, are ready and available, and that this trend went beyond his own body of work. Predator is also a movie that has 2 future governors of America in one movie, which may be a record, actually. Jesse Ventura became the governor of Minnesota in 1998, beating both the Republican and Democratic nominees. Arnold Schwarzenegger was, of course, the governor of California from 2003, replacing Gray Davis and then serving a second term, leaving office in 2011. Unlike becoming president, where you have to be born in the United States, there are no such restrictions for governors. And don't cry for Jean-Claude Van Damme. After his firing, he was cast in Bloodsport, the movie that would make him a global celebrity, not long after his return to the US. That movie was released in February 1988, 8 months after Predator, and his firing was reduced to movie trivia across the world. It seems like he wasn't the only one, though, who thought his face would show up in Predator. Producer Menahem Golan was thrilled to sign him for Bloodsport after learning that he was playing the Predator, but he genuinely believed that Van Damme's face would be visible in the film and that people would be able to identify him. Predator is fun and gory and created a genuine legacy of a terrific, terrifying alien creature who would live on far longer than anything he hunted, except for Dutch and Anna. But this movie is more self-aware than most action movies, and all the better for its ability to critique both the genre of action movies and the real world around it. These men may be macho, but it doesn't save them from a predator who has judged them to be vulnerable and worthy prey. But I guess that makes them even more macho and manly. And if it bleeds, we can kill it. That'd make a catchy song. Thank you for listening. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts on Predator. And as always, thank you for your continued support of this podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode and you do enjoy this podcast and you want to help it grow, please take a moment to leave a rating or review wherever you found this podcast. Tell your friends and family about this podcast or this episode. And you can also find me and follow me on social media. I am at Verbal Diorama on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd. And if you like this episode on Predator, you might also like episode 108 on Alien, episode 114 on Aliens, episode 115 on Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, episode 120 on Prometheus and Alien Covenant, and episode 127 on Alien vs. Predator and Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, because that's basically everything to do with the Predator and the aliens that the Predator hunts canonically. As always, give me feedback. Let me know what you think about my recommendations. So, the team at Amalgamated Dynamics would return to the franchise to work on The Predator. But at the same time as development of that movie was ongoing, producer John Davis was approached by director Dan Trachtenberg and screenwriter Patrick Asen with a concept for something different. A movie about using your smarts and ingenuity against a more technologically advanced adversary. A movie where a young Indigenous woman succeeds against an impossible predator. And if you have a predator, you also have to have prey, right? The next episode of Verbal Diorama is 2022's Prey. I am so excited to be talking about Prey. It is a movie that literally came out of nowhere, and I think blew most of us away with how brilliant it was. Prey is coming up next on this podcast, so join me next week for the history and legacy of Prey. Now, I always say this podcast is free, and it always will be free. However, if you have some spare change that you would like to throw in my direction, and you feel like this show has given you some value, and you want to support the show financially, then you can. You could give a one-off donation at verbaldiorama.com/tips, or you could sign up to become a patron at verbaldiorama.com/Patreon, and you can join the amazing patrons of this podcast. They are Sade, Claudia, Simon, Laurel, Derek, Kat, Andy, Mike, Luke, Michael, Scott, Brendan, Lisa, Sam, Jack, Dave, Stuart, Nicholas So, Kev, Pete, Heather, Danny, Ali, Stu, Brett, Philip M, Michelle, Zenos, Sean, Rhino, Russell, and Philip K. If you want to get in touch with me, then you can. You can email verbaldiorama@gmail.com, or you can go to verbaldiorama.com. You can find all episodes on there. You can find a little bit about me, and you can also find the contact form, which you can fill out as well. All it does is it sends me an email. So you could just bypass that and send me a normal email, or you could go to the website and also send me an email. Either way. You can also find my work at filmstories.co.uk as well. There is a new issue of the magazine that's just come out, and you can find articles written by me online as well. And finally, courtesy of Lego Lambs on YouTube, please check out their channel and their various musical videos, But this was sent to me by a friend recently, and I fully endorse it. Predator the musical. I'll link to the full video in the show notes. It is terrific. Enjoy.
It's using the trees, watching and waiting, killing us off one by one. The chopper is close, but this thing is too fast. We won't make it, it's pointless to run. Talk, no more games.
I don't know what it was. The jungle came alive.
Go on.
It happened very fast. Not easy to describe, but you must have wounded it, unless my eyes deceive. When the big man was killed, its blood was on the leaves.
If it bleeds, we can kill it. She discovered the key. There is proof we can wound it. So repeat after me. If it bleeds, we can kill it.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
Yeah, now take a stand.
Here now, take a stand.
We can bring down this basket.
We can bring down this basket.
If we stick to the plan. If it bleeds, we can kill it.
Something's out there.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
Waiting for us.
2 or 3 men out there at the most. Am I the only one who's awake? I don't believe in goblins and ghosts. Fucking lizard, give me a break.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
An expendable asset.
Yeah, now take a stand.
I woke up, why don't you?
So instead of complaining,
It's not gonna
you should
work.
give us a hand.
I got nothing better to do.
I saw it. I saw it. God damn it. Those eyes, they disappeared. It cut down my friend and it ran while I emptied that gun.
If it bleeds,
I
we can
saw
kill
it.
it.
I saw it. God damn it.
Stop shaving, you don't have a beard.
That thing will come back, and when it does, I'm gonna have me some fun.
If it bleeds,
I'm gonna have me some fun.
If it bleeds, if it bleeds.
if it bleeds, we can kill it.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
We can pull out the wind.
Bye.
Movies you know, movies you don't. Prequels, sequels,